All right, so this is what we got to do next. We're going to go ahead and take our plan, our site plan, and we're going to layer out and create different GIS files that we're going to drop into InfraWorks to use as a coverage area. So we've got to kind of think of what all we need. Well, the way we're going to drop these, each of these are going to sit on top of each other, and so they're going to be based on certain things. So if we think of our design, the first thing that we would want to drop in would be the curb, because that's the farthest out in our design. And so that would be the first thing, which would be the back of curb. And so we could bring that in. And then the next thing that we would have inside that would be our parking lot, the actual bottom of the parking lot. So that would be a parking lot layer, which is basically our original shape that we used in our site plan. Then we have what's inside it. So we have all of our parking islands. So we want to put those in. But then when we put in the parking islands, normally those are going to have grass or something inside. And so we want to actually have what's called a parking island infill layer. Now that we have our parking lot, we can add in the last layer that we're going to put in the actual parking lot area will be our parking stripes. Now, in this case, I also have a building footprint. The building footprint is off of my site, but that's normally the last one I put in anyway, and so that would be the other layer that we're going to put in. So we have our sidewalk, back of curb, then our parking lot islands that are going to show off the curb, then the infill, then the parking stripes. And so we're going to start off with our site plan to create a lot of these because they're pretty easy. A lot of them are going to all be polylines that we're going to offset and things like that. So let's look at this. The first one, the sidewalk back of curb layer, is going to be offset about 1/2 foot from the parking lot layer. So we can take that line that we used and we can offset it 1/2 foot. Then what we're going to want to do is cap the end. So we're going to come in and connect in that portion. And so now we have our back of curb. Now, if you want to also add in a sidewalk, this would be a good time to do that. You just have to add that into your design after you offset. I'll show you what I do right here. And you'll make it a closed polygon. Then the command that we're going to use for each of these is going to be map export. And so we'll just type in map export. It will allow you to export in a lot of different formats. So we can do it as a shapefile, which we messed around with before. And we can do it as a SDF file. That's the file I tend to like to use because it becomes a single file. If you remember in shapefiles, you have multiple files that reference each other all with the same name. So you would have like back of curb, and there would be back curb shapefile, a back of curb SHX file, back of curb database file. This kind of combines them all, makes it into one file. And so I tend to like this one a little bit better. So I'll go ahead and do map export, set it as an SDF file, and then I'll go over select manually. So I'll click on the little button, select manually, pick what I want, and hit OK. As long as this is a closed polygon, for what I want to do here, coverage area, I'm in good shape. So I got to make sure it's closed ahead of time. But once I do and hit OK, I have that one set. So then I can go work on the other one. So the parking lot layer really is just the original boundary that I had. And I'll make sure that's a closed polygon. I'll cap the end, and then I'll make that one. The parking island, same way. Those coming straight off of my original design. The parking island infills will just be an offset inside the parking island of 1/2 foot, and then I'll make those. And then the parking stripe layers, well, this doesn't have to be a closed polygon because we're going to use this a little bit different. We're going to use a buffer with this. So all I have to do is make sure that I add all of those in there. Same step, going to make an SDF, but they don't have to, there's not really any big rule. The only rule that you need to follow is with the handicap spaces, because those come in as blocks and you want to make sure that they're fully exploded. If you don't, then they're actually not going to come up because these programs don't like blocks. And so we're going to explode them out until they're just back to their raw lines, and then we'll bring those up. And then the building footprint's just a closed polygon of the building footprint. So those are the ones that we're going to bring in. So what do I have to do first? Well, in this case, I'm going to open up my week 13.2 exercise 2 site plan, and then I'm going to create my polygons and start sending them in. Now you want to send these in different groups, so don't group them all and then bring them in. Make one, send it in. Make another one, send it in. And then I'll import those into our design. Now, because I've already created a new proposal when I've run in my surface, I'm going to just drop them right into that. If you forgot to do that, you better make a new proposal and then bring them in. Okay? So let's try that. Okay, so here's my site plan. I cleaned up a couple things, turned a few things off just so I could see this right here. If it really bothers you and you don't want to mess with your original site plan, save a copy of it and then start working on the copy. But here we go. So this is my original parking lot. This would be the inside of the parking lot. And so the first step, which is a relatively easy one, is I'm just going to offset. And I'm going to offset 1/2 foot all the places that have a curb that I want to use. And so I'm going to offset 0.5. And so let's get this. So now I have the outside of the curb there. And then I'm going to do these. Now, this is kind of interesting, and I think this is the one I have a problem with. If I try to offset, see, it looks like it wants to do it, and then it won't. And this sometimes happens. It has a little problem with the curve. I'll show you. This is really weird. I don't know why this works, but it does. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to offset out 1/2 foot. Hit escape. Go offset. Let's make it 1 foot. Click that outside barrier and go in, and lo and behold, it goes in. That is so bizarre. I don't know why it does it that way, but sometimes that's an easy fix because I'm sure it's something that's rounding off to the umpteenth decimal place that just isn't working well. But that's one of the ways that you can create those offsets. So now I have these offsets. I'm pretty good to go. I think I have everything done that I need to do. So all I have to do is clean it up. Let's start with this one. Well, I want to actually include this sidewalk over here. So I'm going to do a polyline, and I'm going to go from here all the way over to here. So there's one that I'm going to do. And then I'll just trim this out over on this side because this is all going to look like concrete, so I don't really need the curb edge here. I'm using the sidewalk. So I'm going to hit enter, get rid of that. There we go. And so now I have a nice little area, and I can just use the join command. So double click on that, join, and join this to this, and click that. And now what I want to do here is let's fill this 0. And then finally just cap this off at this end. Oh, we can do fill it here too. So real easy to create these. This isn't hard, it's just a process, and sometimes people don't like processes. So I'm going to join that and hit close, make sure it's closed off. All right, so now we have that one. You'll notice when I cap this, I'm going to cap this on the same line that I'm going to cap this one on. That's on purpose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this one. I'm going to right click and hide it for a second. Hide selected objects. And so now I can work on this. This one's a lot easier. I'm just going to join that one in with here. Make sure it's closed. Oops. There we go. And I think I have everything that I need. So let's unhide this, isolate objects, in object isolation. And I now just am going to go step this right out. So I'm going to use the map export command, and then step by step I'll roll these out. Let me show you the first one, and then I'll do the other ones kind of fast. So I'm going to go map export. It's going to come up. I'm going to put this in another folder here. So I'll just go new folder, and I'll call this GIS. And give them names that you'll be able to remember them later. So I'll go parking back of curb. Hit OK. All right. Now I come in here. I'm going to go click this little button here. Go pick my line that I want to use. Hit enter. If you have a problem, it'll tell you down here. So I picked one object. It said one object selected, 0 filtered out. So I'm pretty good. You don't necessarily have to. I know these are closed polygons, but if you're not quite sure, if they look it, but you're not quite sure, check this box. Treat closed polylines as polygons. It's under options. And then you can hit OK, and it'll write it out. So let me do it with the other ones. Okay, so now I've uploaded everything in there, and I've made separate files of each of them. And so now let's go ahead and we're going to put this into InfraWorks. So if I come over here, I can set up my InfraWorks. Let me kind of put this one over this side. Let's bring this up. And that way you can see me drop these in. And so let's start off from the bottom up. So we want to do back of curb first. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that one in. It'll come in as a coverage area. Pick a color. I'm going to go parking area and pick this one, gray concrete, right up here. I'll hit OK. Close and refresh, and it will come in. So let me bring in all the others, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about them. All right, so let me drop in. I'm going to drop in the parking stripes. It's going to be a little bit different. I also have another problem, two problems that I need to deal with, and I'll do those in a second. So let's come in here. I'm going to drop this in. Parking stripes. I'm going to make this coverage area. I'll come over here. This is going to just be white because this is parking stripes, so I'll pick that color. But before I hit OK, I'm going to come over here to table. Let's set the buffer here to 0.25. Close and refresh. Here's all my parking stripes. That's all good. Now I'm going to double check these islands. I'm not quite sure why they're doing those things, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that in a second, and then I'll come right back. Okay, so let's explain one of the problems that I had here. Let me maximize this out. Although it still did it on this one. I'll have to figure that one out. When I made these, I didn't set them as closed polygons. Therefore, they didn't show up correctly in here. And it only showed one, which is weird. I don't know why I did that. But anyway, I went overhead and corrected that. And I still got to figure out this one. Right here, though, if you look, I've got to figure out what I'm going to do here because these aren't lined up. And it's like, well, why is that happening? Well, let me explain that a little bit in just a little bit. So one of the things you should have noticed is that when I imported the parking lot surfaces and then imported the coverages, there was something that went wrong. And so whenever you drop this in, you'll notice the exact same thing. It's like, okay, what did I do wrong? Well, you didn't do anything. This has to do with a slight discrepancy in how Civil 3D places surfaces as opposed to shape files and SDF files. And the discrepancy comes because there is a slight difference between a survey foot and a standard imperial foot. So an imperial foot is actually 0.99998, 5 nines and an 8 of a survey foot. So that 0.000002 is the difference. And that's it. So why does that cause a problem? Well, it causes a problem because of where we are. Because you've got to understand that that's multiplied each time. That error is coming from your origin point. And so when your northing and easting is somewhere around 10,235.1585 northing and 3,545,505 easting, well, that starts adding up. So if you go over and you work that out, your actual coordinates would be 102.35206 and 354.5512. And so how do we correct this? Well, if we subtract the uncorrected number from the corrected number, what we end up with is somewhere in this area, which is specific to my location, of a difference in northing by about 20.5 feet and a difference in easting by 7.09 feet. Well, that's a lot bigger correction. And so what we're going to do to fix this is I'm going to go into the surfaces, and I am going to, the surface that I added in, and I'll double click on it in data sources, and I'll click on the geolocation tab. There I can go ahead and put in my corrections in the X and Y position. Then if I hit OK, it'll line up. Now, this will be different. Our design site's even more away from the origin. So how would I deal with it in our design site? Well, what I normally would do is just put a circle in the middle of like my parking lot or something and get that coordinate. So I'll just draw a circle, right click, look at the properties, get that coordinate, and then take that, divide it by 0.998, and then subtract out the original coordinate from that survey coordinate. And what you're going to get is your correction factor. And yes, it'll be slightly off because at the edges of your thing, but it's so minuscule. Once you get to that point, you really wouldn't notice the difference. And then you can add that into your design. All right, so let me do that real quick, and then we'll talk about some other stuff, okay? So I came in and corrected this as well. I accidentally grabbed the wrong thing when I was doing it before, and that's why I kept overlapping. But let's go ahead. We're going to correct. So I'm going to come over here to my data sources. I'm going to go find my parking lot grading group. And if I double click on this, I can come up geolocation. And in the X direction, that was 7.09. And in the Y direction, that was, what was it, 20 point, double check, 4701. I'll hit close and refresh. And everything locks in correctly. Not only that, but this also gives me the right offset for the street over here, so I know that everything's coming in right. So all I have to do is add in my building. Let's go ahead and grab that. St. Thomas building. I'm going to drop that one in and set that as a building. I'll go find a pretty cool style. I kind of like this one or this one. I think I'm going to do that one. No. Yes. No. I'll use this one. I'll hit OK. Roof material. I'm actually going to come in here to roofing. Let's do something like that. Hit OK. Close and refresh. Oops. Building's not there. Remember, buildings don't drape on your surface, and so they're actually, normally you have to give it an elevation to get it to line up. That's okay. We're going to double click right here, and if we go over to source and check the right here where it says don't drape, if I change the drop down to drape and hit close and refresh, it'll put it on my surface. So here it is right here. Looks a little weird at this height. Ooh, actually it kind of looks cool at that height. And I'll drop this down. Let's just drop this down to a 1 story, so 10 feet. And there we go. Here's our building. So now we've got our site pretty well done. So there's a good example of the design process involved in this. And when you have to sometimes do corrections, like for the surface, as well as occasionally you have to adjust these, but everything seems to be okay. We're pretty good. Oh, I just noticed something. Sometimes you'll do this and this looks great, but all of a sudden the parking stripes have filled in these two, and that occasionally happens. Let me come over to go parking stripes, and I'm just going to uncheck. I'm going to go over to that source again. I'm going to uncheck convert closed polylines to polygons and hit close and refresh. And so I'm basically telling it to not assume that those are supposed to be closed in there. That cleans it all up. So that's a pretty easy way to get your site into a drawing. It's just a little bit of offsetting, closing things, dropping them in, and all that to get your design. As far as tying into here, we're going to tie it in with a road, but I'm going to show you that after we do our parcel, which is just going to be slightly different. We'll do that in a second.